Keith Urban, the Australian-born guitar virtuoso who redefined modern country music, has sold over 20 million albums worldwide, won 4 Grammy Awards, and performed for audiences exceeding 100 million people across 6 continents. At 58 years old, he stands as one of country music's most beloved figures, married to Academy Award-winning actress Nicole Kidman for nearly 2 decades, living what appears to be a fairy tale life. But the journey to becoming icon came with a devastating price that nearly killed him: cocaine. Addiction that started at 17, alcohol dependency that consumed 2 decades of his life, a shocking intervention just for months after marrying Nicole Kidman in 2006, 98 days in rehab at Betty Ford Center where he confronted demons that had haunted him since childhood, the heartbreaking confession to his new bride: "I'm broken, and I don't know if I can be fixed." The world knows the chart-topping hits, the sold-out stadium tours grossing over $50 million annually, the picture-perfect red carpet moments with Nicole. But behind the Grammy-winning smile lies a story not glamorous, but brutal, a tale of a boy who fled Australia chasing the Nashville dream, only to discover that fame amplifies addiction rather than heals it. If Keith Urban has ever made you believe that broken people can rebuild themselves into something extraordinary, hit like as tribute to his courage to face the darkness. This is the story of a musical prodigy who had everything and nearly threw it all away for cocaine and vodka, a husband who almost destroyed his marriage before it began, and an addict who chose recovery over denial when it would have been easier to hide. October 26, 1967, Whangarei, New Zealand. Keith Lionel Urban was born to Robert Urban, who owned a convenience store, and Marianne Urban, but the family didn't stay in New Zealand long. When Keith was 2 years old, they moved to Caboolture, Queensland, Australia, a working-class town 44 kilometers north of Brisbane. The beginning was not glamorous, but marked by financial struggle and his parents' relentless work ethic. Robert and Marianne worked long hours just to keep the family afloat. Money was tight, luxuries were non-existent, but Robert loved country music. Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton, Glenn Campbell. At 4 years old, Keith begged for a ukulele. His parents scraped together the money. By 6, he had a guitar. He practiced obsessively, hours every day after school. His fingers bled. He didn't care. At 8 years old, Keith Urban won a local talent competition in Brisbane. The prize, $50, and a chance to perform at a real venue. His father saw something, potential, maybe escape. By 10, Keith was performing at the Tamworth Country Music Festival, Australia's biggest country music event. He stood on stage, a child among adults, and played guitar solos that silenced the crowd. But Caboolture felt small, suffocating. Keith knew early that if he wanted to make it, he'd have to leave Australia entirely. At 15, he formed a band called The Ranch. They played local clubs, rodeos, county fairs. Keith was the youngest member, often playing venues where he wasn't legally old enough to be inside. That's where it started: alcohol, then cocaine. Not because he was rebelling, but because the older musicians he idolized were doing it, and he wanted to belong. By 17, Keith Urban was using cocaine regularly. The drugs made him feel confident, invincible, like the rock stars he admired. But they also planted seeds of destruction that would take decades to uproot. 1990, Nashville, Tennessee. Keith, 22, arrived with $2,000 in savings, a guitar, and impossible dreams. Nashville wasn't interested. For 2 years, he played songwriter nights at Bluebird Cafe for $50 a set, waited tables, slept on friends' couches, sent demos to every label in town. Rejection after rejection. "Your sound is too rock for country," they said. He returned to Australia in 1992, defeated, but 1997 changed everything. Capitol Records Nashville signed Keith Urban after hearing his demo. He released his American debut album, Keith Urban, on October 19, 1999. The single "But for the Grace of God" hit #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. Keith was 31 years old. He had spent 13 years chasing this moment, The album sold 500,000 copies, certified gold. Then came 2000 to Golden Road, his second studio album, produced 3 consecutive #1 singles, Somebody Like You, Raining on Sunday, and Who Wouldn't Wanna Be Me. The album went triple platinum, selling over 3 million copies. Keith earned approximately $5 million from album sales and touring in 2002-2003 alone. By 2004, he released Be Here, which debuted at #1 on the Billboard Country Albums chart and eventually sold for million copies. He won his first Grammy Award in 2006 for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. He was performing 100 shows a year, grossing $1 million per concert by 2005. And through it all, he was drinking, using cocaine, functioning but drowning. The world saw success, but the truth was different. January 2005, G-Day USA Gala in Los Angeles. Keith Urban, 37, met Nicole Kidman, 37, an Academy Award-winning actress from Australia. She had divorced Tom Cruise in 2001 after 10 years of marriage. She was guarded, careful. Keith was immediately smitten. They began dating quietly. He was touring. She was filming. But whenever possible, they found each other. June 25, 2006, Manly, Australia. Keith and Nicole married in a small ceremony at Cardinal Chiretti Memorial Chapel. She wore Nicolas Ghesquière for Balenciaga. He wore black. They exchanged vows surrounded by 230 guests. The world called it a fairy tale. For months later, the fairy tale nearly ended. October 2006. Keith Urban, 38, was spiraling. The marriage to Nicole should have been the happiest time of his life. Instead, the pressure intensified his addiction. He drank vodka before concerts, snorted cocaine in dressing rooms, told himself he had it under control. Nicole watched the man she loved disappear behind glassy eyes and broken promises. What few people know is that Keith had been to rehab once before, briefly in 1998, but relapsed within months. This time was different. Nicole organized an intervention. She gave him an ultimatum: get help or lose everything. On October 19, 2006, exactly 4 months after their wedding, Keith checked into Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, California. He stayed 98 days. Nicole visited weekly. She could have walked away. Their marriage was so new that an annulment would have been easy, but she stayed. In 2006, Keith released a statement: I deeply regret the hurt this has caused Nicole and the ones who love and support me. One can never let one's guard down on recovery, and I'm afraid that I have. It is heartbreaking when a man achieves his dreams and finds himself unable to enjoy them. Without substances to numb the fear of losing it all. Behind the Grammy Awards and #1 hits, Keith was terrified of failure, of not being good enough, of being exposed as a fraud who got lucky. The cocaine and alcohol quieted those voices, but they also nearly killed him. In rehab, Keith confronted the trauma, the years of rejection, the imposter syndrome, the pressure of being married to one of the world's most famous actresses. He learned that addiction wasn't about weakness, but about pain he'd never processed. January 2007. Keith Urban, 39, completed treatment and returned home to Nashville. Nicole was waiting. She saved my life. He later said in interviews, I don't know where I'd be without her grace. But recovery isn't linear. 2008 brought Temptation. Touring resumed. 150 shows across North America. The lifestyle, late nights, after parties, access to anything he wanted. Keith relapsed briefly on alcohol. He didn't hide it. He called his sponsor immediately. Attended AA meetings while on tour. Nicole stood by him again. July 7, 2008. They welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose Kidman Urban, born via surrogate in Nashville, December 28, 2010. Their second daughter, Faith Margaret Kidman Urban, was born. Becoming a father changed Keith in ways rehab couldn't. I couldn't look at my daughters and be the man I was, he said. He committed to sobriety with renewed intensity. Daily meetings, therapy, spiritual practice. But 2016 brought another crushing blow. Keith's father, Robert Urban died of cancer at 73 years old. Keith was 48. He had been sober for nearly 10 years. But grief tested him. He leaned into his family, into music, into the tools he'd learned, and he didn't relapse. October 26, 2025. Keith Urban turned 58 years old. He has been sober for nearly 19 years, the longest stretch of his adult life, without drugs or alcohol. He lives in Nashville with Nicole, 58, and their daughters Sunday, 17, and Faith, 15. His net worth sits at approximately $75 million, rebuilt through touring, album sales, endorsement deals, and his role as a judge on American Idol from 2012 to 2016, which paid him $4 million per season. He released his 12th studio album, High, in 2024, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard 200. He continues to tour, though less aggressively, 50 to 60 shows per year instead of 150. He headlines MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas periodically, earning $2 million per weekend residency. But more importantly, Keith speaks openly about addiction. He supports Music Cares, a charity providing addiction services to musicians. He's donated over $1 million since 2010. He attends AA meetings regularly, sometimes in Nashville, sometimes on the road, sometimes virtually. Sobriety isn't something you achieve once, he says. It's something you choose every single day. Nicole and Keith celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary in June 2025. They renewed their vows privately in Australia. Friends say the marriage is stronger now than ever, built not on perfection, but on honesty. Keith meditates daily, practices gratitude, writes music not to escape pain, but to process it. He has reconciled with his past, the kid from Caboolture who felt like he'd never be enough, the addict who nearly destroyed everything. At 58, he understands that the greatest music comes not from pretending to have it all together, but from admitting you don't. At 58, Keith Urban stands as proof that redemption is possible if you're willing to confront the darkest parts of yourself and choose healing over hiding. From Caboolture, Australia to Nashville, from cocaine addiction at 17 to 19 years of sobriety, from nearly losing Nicole Kidman for months into marriage to building a family that represents everything he thought addiction had stolen from him. He has sold 20 million albums, won 4 Grammys, played for 100 million fans, but his greatest achievement isn't measured in awards or ticket sales. It's measured in 19 years of waking up and choosing sobriety, 19 years of being present for his wife and daughters, 19 years of proving that fame doesn't have to equal self-destructs. If this story touched your heart, leave a tribute below. Share a moment when Keith Urban's music or honesty reminded you that falling doesn't define us, but getting back up and staying up does. One day at a time, even when the world is watching. Because the real story is never about the spotlight, but about what you do when it exposes everything you've been hiding.